Okay, well, in 2004, we nominated John Kerry. But John Kerry wasn't your candidate in the caucuses, right? Was that, I think you went with John Edwards?
I did.
That was a really important family decision at the time, right?
It was.
Your family was split. Can you tell me how they were kind of split before the family
No.
finally came? You can't? Is it a secret?
No, you don't do that.
But that was
No,
important.
when we meet behind closed doors, well, we'll have our fights, but when we come out in the public, we're together.
That was really remarkable to me, though, that you had that discussion over a weekend and came to consensus as to who you're going to support. That was really interesting, because at that point, your family had gotten to a point where they were so significant in the community that it was important for you all to be on the same page, wasn't it?
In my opinion, it was.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it was to the place that other people had a big influence on me within the family.
Uh-huh. And I remember that John Edwards, you had a very, very significant event for him out here in Altoona right before the caucuses. You packed the place. That was a big deal. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes.
And do you tell me a little bit about his momentum? Did you constantly see the momentum coming up through the caucus period?
I didn't see it until the week before. But I knew when that was being discussed at that point in time, and I still had some political connections down in the Knoxville area, and a gentleman down there by the name of Geary, and I called and talked to him on the phone, and I said, how well will Marion County support John Edwards? And he said, Ed, if we put out the word that you guys are going to be for him, we're going to be with you.
Wow.
And there was a big contingency from Marion County that showed up to that, and then we went to Dallas County and especially in the Perry area, where we have connections with the mayor of Perry, and we had a group that showed up from there. Now, keep in mind too that at that point in time, that Henderson, the former sheriff of Polk County, he got on board, and he put the combination together. So you just had some things that went well, and then out of that, if you'll remember that Sunday, the Des Moines Register endorsed him. So that's the combination that came together. You know, in politics, you know, it's better that you be lucky than be good. But there were some things that came into play that did give him the momentum to make the showing that he made. And
he had a tremendously good result out here in eastern Polk County, thanks to you. If I remember
Yes,
right.
yes.
It made a huge difference. Do you think if you had a few more days, you might have taken over, made it help win the state? Was there anything else that, or do you think it was going to pretty much just end up the way it did?
The timing on it was too close to the election to have that influence. That's something that you're just not going to pick up overnight. You can have, you know, 24 hours in politics is a long time, but when you try to switch across the entire state, you know, if you can get something done within 2 weeks, you're lucky. So no, I don't think so.
I remember I came out and talked to you after the election in 2004, because one of the places that John Kerry had really lost strength was in eastern Polk County. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And I remember one of the things you told me was, look at the two results, Boswell and Kerry. Remember that?
Yes, I do.
And what was significant about that for at least eastern Polk County?
Well, the same people that were supporting Edwards were supporting Boswell. And it was a combination that, you know, more than that the two of them fit together, it was that the supporters were the same. And so they fit. And, you know, that a lot of things happen within politics, and you keep in mind that the relationship that Polk County's had with Jasper County. And Jasper County, within my political life, was awfully important to me. And that goes back to the days of Soapy Owens and Bill Gannon and the Jasper County Democrats. And they fit together.
And tell me what challenges the Democratic Party has. let's just talk about eastern Polk County and western Jasper County for the future to maintain our base out here.
I don't know that, there comes a time, Tom, where you sit back and you take a look at has things just passed me by, because I went through the Hoffa period of the Teamsters, of kind of rebelling from the Democrat Party, and because of the investigation of Kennedy, and they were opposed to the Kennedy because of the way that they'd been treated in the Hoffa group. And you look at that from this standpoint, that the labor movement's been its own worst enemy. If they think that they can join up with the Republican Party and get the Republican Party to support them, they're just fooling themselves. That's just a foolhardy thought. But that's what they tried to do, and you've watched that before. And that within our own party, I've watched the situation of where we got to bring this person into line, and the way to do that is defeat him. And you've elected a Republican. It's stupid. And so how do you keep that from happening? Well, you're going to have renegades anytime that you get into an organization, and they're going to be there, and the only thing you can do is just hope that you've got a majority of the people that'll just look at what should be done and head that way. And they've got to have some fundamental beliefs in that together we can accomplish some things that if we get at each other, we're not going to. When I was first elected district 5th District Committee man, one of the jobs that I had, and I'll tell you who I would go to, was former Judge Clark. He was a previous committee man and a leader. He was former county chairman, had your job. And I'd sit down with Wade and visit with him, and Wade had told me, he said, Ed, you've got to get your elected officials unified. And so what I did out of that was that I called a convention of all the Democrat office holders, state representatives, senators, right down through the county. And we had a meeting at the AFL-CIO office there on Walker. And one of the things that I did was that at that point in time was that I told anybody that takes on another Democrat and criticized another Democrat, because we had the Board of Supervisors criticizing the sheriff criticizing the Board of Supervisors, and on. And I remember that Ray Fenton was county attorney. And Ray asked me, he said, Ed, do I have to swear to this oath? Yes, Ray. We're all going to. Every one of us. And this is the way it's going to be. You've got two choices. You can either do it my way, or else you can vote me out of office. And then you've got to decide which way you want him. He says, I like what you do. And that was the end of that, and everybody signed on. And we went through the election then without any further problem. But that kind of party discipline is not there today. You don't have that ability, and you keep in mind that at that point in time I had control of the purse strings. And if you wanted to come to me for a contribution to help you in your campaign, that you're going to have to be with me. And it was a tight-run ship. But you can't do that today. So what's the answer? You keep in mind, the best politics is good government. There are exceptions to that. The exception that I'll give you is that you and I have watched in our lifetime is Morrow and Secretary of State.
Yes.
You could not have had, and what did Governor Branstad do? Appointed him immediately to head the Labor Department. Right. Our smartest move he could make, because he picked out one of ours that was a good worker, that knew how to run things, that did a good job, and turned him over to the place that now he's part of the Republican administration. and don't get me wrong, Mike should have taken the job. But Mike was probably the best Secretary of State we ever had, no disrespect for Culver.
No.
But he innovated some things he cared about, and he approached it from what's good for the people. And so the answer to your question is, if you're going to have the power in the Democrat Party, you got to have good government, and you got to lead, but you got to have the sensitivity for the people too.
And you'd agree with me that it's important in some districts to take a Democrat who fixes the district and not necessarily be punitive towards that Democrat if they're not 100% on all issues that you think Democrats should have.
You're going to need their vote as a Democrat.
Right.
Now, what you do is that you talk to that individual and see if you can't convince them that the smart thing to do is to follow the party line.
Correct.
That's the way that you approach that. You don't take them out of office. You get somebody that can win office. I can tell you this, they didn't get there if they didn't have a majority of the vote to get there in the first place.
Right.
So don't you be screwing it up to the place that you fouled it up now that we got somebody from the opposite party in office.
And that's one of the things I've always admired about you. I always say that you're a person who's a leader without a title, because you always show great leadership, and you don't need a title to do that.
And that's kind of you to say that.
One of the first times that we had a chance to work together in detail had to do with that sheriff's race in 2000. We had a primary that was very contentious, and you stepped up and you mediated peace between the two candidates once the primary was over, and that was a huge, huge result, because we were able to elect a sheriff.
We would have probably, if we hadn't give the two characters their position in that too, Tom, if you'll remember, this they were very cooperative in working with you and I to see that that was done, and it took concessions on the one that won and took concessions on the one that lost. So you had concessions made on both sides, which is what you're supposed to do. But you're correct. I think the Republicans would have won Polk County if we hadn't put things back together, because you were dividing police departments is what you were doing.
Correct.
And that's what was happening.
And there was a good chance that the loser was going to run as an independent, which would have split the Democratic vote, which would have been huge. And you've always said that there isn't a single office that isn't important, but you've really put a lot of emphasis on the sheriff, thinking that lots of people miss that as a partisan office that's important. Why do you think that the county sheriff's office is so important?
Sheriff's office has always been historically the number one position statewide. So within Polk County, there are other offices that are very important, okay? But out across the state, the sheriff is the one that they look to as the leader of that party. And you have to have the sheriff of Polk County be from the Democrat Party to have the influence statewide. You know, if I'm going to run for governor, the last place in the world I want to run from is from Polk County. And then that's just simply because of the jealousies that's out there across the state. But from the standpoint of the most important elective office within the party, it's the sheriff's office.
The sheriff's office has to work with the board of supervisors. They control a lot of manpower or law enforcement power, because they have a number of people working for them. And it's all very important, isn't it?
That is correct.
To the party organization. And like you said, good government seems to follow when you have a good sheriff.
There's no question that that's true. And we've had some good sheriffs, you know. There isn't any question that Wilbur Hildreth was the ultimate politician, you know. I mean, and knew how to organize and had loyalty surrounding. We've gone with Henderson, and I think McCarthy's doing a good job. He's somebody that I've supported, and I'm not disappointed in that support that I've given him.
That's right. And I remember you came to me early and said, this is a race we have to win.
That's right.
And it was really important, and you were right. So we worked hard on that race as well. Is there anything else that you want to talk about with regard to politics that you...
Oh, I've kind of enjoyed just talking to you, Tom.
Okay.
You know, politics has been very important to me. It just has, and you know, the loss of Leonard Boswell in the congressional seat, and I've told you that the congressman's office is here, and you know, when Latham won, I was really concerned because he was in a place where he could build a dynasty here and could really cause us problems on the county level. I don't see him doing that. He's not taking advantage of that. candid with you, his closeness to Bonner is hurting him here. And that's good for the Democrats. And Bonner is good for the Democrats.
I know that that was a race we worked hard on as well. You were really someone who was one of Boswell's best supporters, and I really think he delivered more to the district than anybody ever knew. And
Well,
so important.
once that you start down that primrose path with the register blasting you that you're not doing this or that, but they never got past the skin. They never looked at his position on the Foreign Relations Committee, and I think that probably Boswell. If you was to pick the two members of Congress, Senate and the House, you'd look at McCain and Boswell. That their records prove it, and Boswell probably had more of an insight on foreign relations than any of our Congress people. And that's not taking anything away from anybody else. What that is saying the credit that this was Boswell. So he just did that.
But when I think back on our political history, the two races that made me the saddest, I think, were ones that you highlighted. Neil Smith being beaten, and also Morrow. Morrow was a tremendous Secretary of State. And I could not understand why he got fired. It made no sense.
Well,
and Neil Smith
the number one loss was Neil's, because that Art Davis and I were co-chair of that campaign. We knew in August that we were not going to be able to overcome what was out in western Iowa, and and Neil knew it. Neil talked about it. But it was so disappointing to me on all three of those individuals, whether you take Mike Morrow, or you take Leonard Boswell, or you take Neil Smith, in that in all three of those races, you couldn't without a question but say that the best man lost.
Oh, yes.
That's all you could say. Latham can't hold a candle to Boswell's relationship across the world. Just can't. And of course, you know what I think of Neil Smith. Neil Smith was in a class of his own.
Still is. He's phenomenal.
When I graduated from law school in 1964, Neil asked me to come to Washington because at that time Bert Banstra had been elected congressman, and Bert Banstra was his administrative assistant. And so I went out and met with Neil, and we went to the congressional lunchroom, and Neil was talking to me about becoming his administrative assistant. And he had to leave the room and go with somebody for a few minutes, and when he left, Lois turned to me and she said, "I'm not living in Washington." And I've always kidded Tom Harkin about the fact, because he came on, but you had Tom Dawson and Larson. Larson followed first, and then Tom Dawson. And I always kidded him. I said, if my wife let me live in Washington, I might have been a U.S. Senator. You never know, Tom. But I really enjoyed Tom.
Well, it's been good talking to you.
Thank
really
you.
Appreciate it, as always. And I appreciate your friendship through the years. You've had more influence on me than you ever.
You know what I think of you, buddy.
Okay.
You've done an excellent job as county chair.
Well, thank you, sir.
And that's why you got my support.
I know it.
Because you did it.
Well, I remember you were one of the first ones.